Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Modern App Development on Salesforce. My name is Mohit. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to automate developer workflow and deployments for Salesforce and Heroku apps. I'm joined by my friend and colleague Julian. Julian, welcome to the show. And thank you so much for joining. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you, Mohit, for having me here. My name is Julian Duque. I am your lead developer advocate here at Salesforce, working for the Heroku team, and also your JavaScript guy. So, very happy to join you on this last episode of the Modern App Development series on the Salesforce platform, and super happy to share what we have for today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian. Now, before we begin, there's a forward looking statement here. So please do not make any purchasing decision based on anything forward looking that we make in this presentation. So with that, this is the last episode of Modern App Development on Salesforce. But, if you're joining us for the first time, do not worry. We post all our recordings on our YouTube channel as well as on the Trailhead Live. There's a bit.ly URL here where you can go to the YouTube playlist that we have on our developer channel and catch all the on-demand recordings of all the sessions that we did. Okay, so with that, how about Julian? We kick it off today. So if you look at our series, right, Julian, from the beginning, right, we covered a lot of aspects and a lot of grounds, from application design to code, and then testing it, and finally, we are just working through, how to release, how to successfully release and deploy your applications. So I thought I'll share this wheel. This is very interesting because, this is how normally any software project has a life cycle of you go from this plan stage, you code, you test, you test with your users, that is user acceptance testing, and release. But what this wheel actually shows is the tools in Salesforce that are involved for all of these life cycles. So I thought this is interesting, and pay attention to a couple of things here, like for example continuous integration and continuous delivery, and that's what we're going to talk about. So continuous integration, Julian, is a test automation. So let's say you have Lightning Web Components, you have Apex classes, or you have Node modules in your project. You want to make sure you write tests so that and automate them through a continuous integration server. And we're going to show you some examples of a sample template of how to actually get started if this is the first time you are sort of hearing this term continuous integration, or if you do not have any prior exposure to this topic. So but continuous integration in simple terms is test automation. So all the tests that you run right before we merge any new feature, we make sure to run those tests automatically. So that's continuous integration. And continuous delivery is release automation. That means if you want to release your product, you don't have to do a lot of manual steps. For example, today, if you want to release a Salesforce application, you might have to type packaging commands, etc. Right? You don't have to actually do that in continuous delivery because you automate that step. Less manual steps means they are less prone to error and more successful deployments actually. Julian, you want to talk about anything from your experience around continuous integration and continuous delivery?
Sure. I mean, that's life changing pretty much pattern for developers. It ensures that the whole development lifecycle process is running as expected. When you are able to automate that flow, when you are able to automate not only making sure all of the different parts of your application are properly tested, and you have like something in place that are making sure that everything is tested, even though when you are pushing new features to your code, and also making sure that everything is also automated deployed to the different stages of your application, like to staging or or to production. That saves a lot of time for teams and saves a lot of time for developers. Even remember on our previous episode that we were talking about publishing modules to npm and publishing node.js and javascript modules to the npm. One of the best practices around is to do that automatically on a
Automated.
automated on a CI/CD workflow.
Got it.
So you
Okay.
have CI/CD workflow while writing your modules. Make sure that the CD part, the continuous delivery part, is the one that is pushing to npm instead of doing manually, because sometimes manually you make mistakes and you forget things. So
Yeah.
you have a very good process in place that's going to save a lot of time.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. So what is our goal with continuous integration and continuous delivery? Obviously, it is to release with confidence. So I just wanted to highlight some points on what we are trying to actually solve, right? So, for example, this might be very common in your organization, right? Where a change was overridden by someone else's change set or deployment. If you have continuous integration in place, these things will be, if you have a process and continuous integration, right? These things will be, less. You're less. There are less chances of actually getting into this sort of, problems of code overwritten, etc. Because you're tracking everything. So the other thing is, if you do not have like continuous integration along with version control and a process in place, again, we are specifying this word process because it's also mindset. It's not just tools and technology. You also have to get your developers, your release managers, everyone in sync with this process. So there's a lot of mindset change, and it involves governance, and it also involves everybody sort of working towards a common goal, right? So but with once you have like continuous integration, right, you no more have this problem of you don't know, like for example, a lot of times you might be of this opinion that you don't know what changes are going into this release, right? So with continuous integration, you actually solve this problem because there's a version control in place like Git, and you track what changes going in your next release. Similarly, a change was made by an app, but you don't know who made it, when, or why. So that problem is also solved. So we released a change, but now we want to roll it back. So one of the really other benefits of continuous integration and continuous delivery is you can roll back your changes because you know what you sort of deployed, right? So you can roll back that commit. And we're going to talk a bit about Git and all those things as we move along. So the key part of continuous integration in Salesforce, and I'm talking from Salesforce perspective, Julian will definitely bring from Heroku perspective, but you will see that a lot of things are same, like a lot of the concepts are same. But the key is to have a version control, like source driven. So source driven means it's like you have a version control like Git, where you version all your metadata, and basically you use Salesforce CLI and CI/CD tooling. That means you need a continuous integration server. You need to write your developer workflow, and you want your workflow will be such a way that the moment you build a feature and raise a pull request to merge against the actual code base, right, we will make sure to run your Lightning Web Component UI tests, Apex unit tests, and then following that, if everything looks good, it will go to other environments. So before it goes to deployment, right, you will see that we need to raise a pull request, and we will tell you what is a pull request if you are not familiar with that. And then it will go to our other branches. And also when you actually go to production, you tag with the version tag saying, okay, this is X version of the product. And we talked about SEM versioning in the last episodes, so you can catch up on that. And also the packaging technology is actually driven towards that. So how about, Julian, instead of talking through all these concepts, how about we actually show our developers how we have sort of a process in place for releasing sample app galleries, right? We treat all of our applications as products, and we have CI/CD in place, and how we do reviews, etc. So we're going to deep dive into that developer workflow that we have, so that it gives you an idea. Now that's an example. So again, take it with fine grain of salt, but feel free to take a lot of concepts from that. Okay, so Julian, how about we go to our Git repository, right? So Trailhead apps, right? This is where you can go and find all of the sample apps, and one of the sample apps in this series that we focused is eCard. So I'm going to pick that as an example here to show you the developer workflow that we have. But for almost all of our sample gallery apps, we follow the same developer workflow. Okay. So how about, Julian, that I try to build a feature? Let's say, I'm trying to build something, a feature, and let's see how I sort of proceed, with the feature. How would I create my branches, and then, how do I submit that request for the pull request, and what happens in that process? Let's just let's just play with it and see what happens. Okay. So for that, Julian, I have actually already cloned my project. So this is the project in Git. It's the same Git project, the e-cars application, and I've just said git clone and I've cloned it. Obviously, I pushed it to the scratch org, etc. And I am on my main branch, which is the branch that is a production branch. So now, Julian, let's say I'm building a new feature. Let's say you've asked me to build a feature called, let's just say feature 1 for time being. That's not a fancy name, but for timing, let's leave with it. So how about, what do we need to do to build a feature, right? So first thing I do is I need a branch, and the branch should have the code that is exactly clone of what is there in the current main branch, right? So that, I have the replica exactly, and I'm building a feature, and I can track the differences, right? So git checkout, right? And because it is a new branch, Julian, dash branch, right? And then I just want to name my branch with my name saying Mohit. And maybe if this is a feature 1, I'm going to say, git checkout feature 1, right? So once I do that, I'm switched now to a new branch called Mohit feature 1, which, as you can see, it's a local branch at this point. It doesn't exist in the Git, but this is a local branch. And now I'm going to make some changes. How about, Julian, we break the code, just to see what happens, if unintended. Yeah, let's break it. So I'm gonna go ahead and probably change one of these system asserts to something else. Maybe let's just add 1 here. Okay. So I intentionally broke the code. Definitely do not break your code. But let's assume, as a part of my refactoring, I was working on a feature. I did something and I broke one of those test classes. So I'm gonna just say here, Julian, that okay. So the thing about Visual Studio Code is it has the inbuilt sort of Git integration. So sometimes I don't have to type in all the command, but if you're like if you like to work in in command line, you can say git status and it will tell which file you modify, right? So I want to commit that, right? So let's add that up, Julian. Again, we can do it from here or from command line, whatever you feel comfortable with. I just added it, right? As you can see, it staged my change, and then I'm gonna say git commit, let's say feature 1. Okay, so feature 1, and now what I'm gonna do is commit this, right? So it's gonna check for there are some rules that we have configured, like if we have not violated the prettier, there are some pre-commit tasks actually that gets run. Okay, so it seems like everything is fine, everything looks good from my perspective. I'm just gonna push this change, right, to the remote now. Right now you can easily do that with this symbol, right? So I'm gonna just click on this, and it's gonna push my change to the server. Okay, so now it's gonna push the change to the server, and let's come back. So as soon as I pushed my feature, it automatically showed that I have a recent changes here, like a feature here, right, Julian? So now definitely, Julian, I want to raise a pull request here, right, so that my changes can be merged. And it says there are no conflicts. Obviously, if there are conflicts, you have to mention. And for our repo, we have configured certain templates of how you should basically request a PR. There are some prerequisites here, so you can configure these templates, etc. in Git. I'm just gonna say test feature 1, just for the time being, right? So I'm gonna create a pull request. Now notice what happens. So as soon as I create pull request, there are certain things that are happening. Like for example, now what will happen is there are certain rules that have been configured, It's going to make sure that all those, I comply with all those rules. Like for example, my branch naming is fine. Now it has already, there's a Salesforce DXPR scratch org rule. And what this rule will do is it's going to run some CI CD automation steps, right? Like, it's going to make sure that, it's going to install all the dependencies, see whether my code is properly formatted, and then it's going to create a scratch arc, push all my code, run the test, and make sure everything is fine. If things are not fine, it's going to say, no, this PR is not good for merge. It will fail. Like for example, you see the merging is currently blocked, and you will see that the scratch arc test is going to fail because again, because I made a mistake here, right? I broke the test. So it's starting a workflow. So Julian, let this workflow run. Meanwhile, we take a look at how we have sort of established this neat little process here of releasing these sample apps. And, let's see how this thing, how have we accomplished this, right? So to show you that, let me actually switch back to my VS Code, right? So let's switch back to my VS Code and let's actually get into our workflows, okay? And I want you to pay attention to the current workflow that is running, which I think, Julian, is the scratch arc test workflow, right? So how about we look at that? So I think it is this workflow. Okay, so this is the workflow, right? Scratch Salesforce DXPR, right? So let's look at this, Julian, and I want so let's just understand fundamentally what does a CI/CD process involves, right? So it requires a continuous integration server and a workflow. Okay, so at a very high level, it requires only two things. You need a continuous integration server so that when you push the code, it can run some workflows, right? And then you need to define that workflow. Now, there are a lot of vendors in the market which already provide these capability, right? So obviously you can have your own server, like let's say Jenkins, or, you're running some kind of your own utility, right? Obviously you can do that, right? But these days cloud vendors are also providing, for example, Circle CI, Travis CI, there are things like Bitbucket, Bamboo, so there are so many CI CD vendors, GitLabs and so on. They provide them, they make this easy because they provide that as a service, CI CD as a service. So all that you take care of is just writing your workflow, and they take care of all other things for you, like the server, the infrastructure, and everything. But one of the latest addition has been Git itself. So Git provides something called GitHub Actions, and you can read about them, online about GitHub Actions. I also have some references. And GitHub Actions, allow you to do the CI/CD. Like it allows you to do the continuous integration. They manage the server. So all that you need to do to get started is create a .github folder, and in that have a workflows folder, and then you can start writing your CI/CD rules in that folder, or your developer workflow, right? So for example, let's look at this file, which basically is a part of the developer workflow that runs when a pull request is open. So the first thing it does, Julian, is when it says on, what is, like, when should that workflow run, right? So we say it should run when the pull request is opened, edited, synchronized, or reopened, right? And it has some branches to ignore. So let's say it's a pre-release branch, there's a pre-release workflow. So we don't want this workflow to actually run on certain branches. So you can do that as well. This is called filtering, basically. And then we have jobs to be executed, like what jobs to be executed, right? So obviously what we want to do here is, now there is little thing, and I don't want to get into detail of this. This is basically, when a bot is running, we want to skip our CI/CD run. So you can use the skip CI to do that. But what are we doing here? So our first step is formatting and linting, right? So what we do here in the formatting and linting is we check out our source code, okay? And then, Julian, we need all the node modules, right? So there is an action. So it uses an action called cache v1. Now you might ask me, where did this action come from, right? So GitHub has a marketplace where there is a lot of actions already pre-built for you. You can build your own action as well, and all that thing you can do with Node. So that's the other reason to learn Node, is because you can use in your DevOps, etc. But yeah, so we have this caching action, which what it does is every time it doesn't have to, sort of get all these dependencies. If there is a dependency that's already been got, it just caches it. Okay. Then we install the npm dependency, that is by running npm ci, that is, whatever is there in the package.json, for prettier and jest, it does that. Then it does the code formatting, Julian, and then it does the linting. So this is all we put it together in a task called formatting and linting. So that's the thing, right? Then comes the scratch org test, and which runs on Ubuntu latest, right? Now you can select the operating system as well. In this case, in Salesforce world, because it anyway runs on Salesforce, it doesn't matter. But let's say you're building something which is OS specific, right? For your Node app, you can run on Mac or Windows or Ubuntu. All of them is managed by GitHub Actions. So you basically run on Ubuntu latest, and what you're doing here is installing the Salesforce CLI. So this command is to install the Salesforce CLI. You check the source out, right? So populate auth file. So this is for authentication basically. So you have to make sure that the CI/CD server or the continuous integration server or the GitHub server has to connect to Salesforce, right? And we use a method called sfdx auth URL, which is part of the auth commands actually that we have, right? So we use that auth URL, and then we authenticate to the dev hub. Julian, we need this because we have to create a scratch org. We create the scratch org, we push our source, we assign the permission set, we import the sample data, and then we run the test. Now, one thing this app does not show in particular is you can also run your LWC tests, and all other apps have. This app doesn't have like LWC test in place. We'll put together, but yeah, you can run your LWC test, and then you can upload the code coverage also to another third-party vendor called Code Coverage, which provides like a comparison between your code coverage before this test was run and after this test was run, so that you can see the coverage between the commits, right? And then finally you delete the scratch org, right? So this is all the steps or the workflow that's going to happen. And as you can see, pretty scriptable. Salesforce CLI and Heroku CLI, all of them are scriptable. So writing these YAML files, so this is called .yml, which is basically used to write the workflow. So writing these YAML files is new. Not a lot of work actually, because you're not maintaining the infrastructure, or you don't have a lot of things here. All that you're focusing is writing a workflow with a simple YAML definition, right? So that's one of the ways that we have here. How about Julian, we come back and see. So as expected, our test run is failed, and we were able to catch it up. So as you can see, all of these steps that I was explaining, it actually went one by one, in serial mode. So when it ran the test, it clearly showed that there was an assertion failure, and this was the expected value while this was the thing, right? So it came. So let's look at what happened to our PR, the pull request that I raised. So as you can see, let's just refresh so that it clearly shows. So as you can see, it says a red indicator, which is definitely not good. And if I submit this to Julian is going to just look at it and say, okay, this thing was not correct, and it's going to reject this PR pretty quickly, because hey, you've broken this test, right? And you can other advantage of GitHub is you can look at the change that happened, right? So as you can see, it clearly showed that I changed this line and this was the thing. So that's the benefit with source control. Having a continuous integration in place is you can track like, okay, what are the things that are going into your branch. You can automate it so that all of your tests actually run, and you can make sure that there's nothing unintentional, or you're not merging a code which has a possibility to break your application. So Julian, how about we just close this PR, because it's not good. So I'm just gonna basically go and say close the PR, because I know this is not good PR, right? And I can delete the branch if I want. Obviously I'm gonna delete it because okay. So with that, Julian, so this is one of the examples again, and I want to say that for Salesforce application, if you have a monolith application, that means you already have a lot of metadata in place, and it's in 10,000s of scale. Then you should start breaking that metadata into modules, and then establish this workflow. Because if you're trying to deploy everything, every time a small change is made, there's a lot of time that's going to be consumed. And lately on our blog, we also launched something called as Delta plugin. It's an unofficial open source plugin, but that allows you to do Delta deployments as well. If you want to save time by just doing a Delta deploys instead of sort of deploying the whole thing from the source. But deploying from the source has its own advantage, because you're doing the continuous delivery, that is making sure all of your dependencies are taken care. Okay, with that, Julian, are we ready to look at the Heroku side of things here?
Of course. Yeah, help me with a couple of slides before my activity and
Yes.
continue. So we previously learned how to deploy applications to Heroku by using Git. So the basic way to deploy applications, remember, first is to create an Heroku application, and then we are going to use Git push to push the application to the Heroku Git server that it is associated with your application. But there are like different ways to deploy your application as well. One is doing a GitHub integration. This means that you will be able to deploy automatically every time you push your application to a specific branch. It doesn't need to be the main branch, it can be any other branch. Let's say you have a production branch, and you want every time you move your code to the production branch, that application be deployed automatically to Heroku. So later, I'm going to show you how to enable these automatic deployments to Heroku using GitHub. Also, on the next slide, there is a very simple way to deploy application, and it is mostly when you wanna have some sort of preview of your application for users, or you want to have like a self-replicating application. So you can create a deploy button. This deploy button is very popular in certain GitHub repositories where you all have like an application that you want other people to deploy. For example, Discord bots or Slack bots, or I have seen like some Minecraft applications as well, where you just click to deploy and it will go through the whole process to deploy the application to Heroku. So it's going to be like an easy way to add this capability to your app. So we are going to learn how to do both, how to deploy automatically to Heroku using GitHub, and how to add a deploy to Heroku button to your GitHub README or to your website, because it can be added anywhere.
Got it.
And also, we have a set of different utilities to have CI/CD on the Heroku platform. This set of utilities are called Heroku Flow, and pretty much it's bringing that developer experience that Heroku has, simplifying all of the development lifecycle management for you. So we are going to learn how to create an Heroku pipeline, how to also enable automatic deployment to Heroku on that pipeline. So we are going to have a staging application, a production application, and also one of my favorite features, which is review apps. So review apps is a way to automatically deploy an application to Heroku every time a new pull request is open. So when a new pull request is open, it's going to deploy this ephemeral application. It's going to give you a random URL, so your team can review if the application and the new feature is what you expect. And then after you merge that pull request, the application is going to be moved to a staging, and a staging is going to be deployed. So it is a way to manage the releases of your Heroku application.
Awesome. Julian, I had one question. I know that we use GitHub Actions actually as as our CI tool for a lot of us Apple Gallery apps, right? And you're saying that a lot of the things are already there in this Heroku Flow as well. Um, so what's the difference between the Heroku Flow and GitHub Actions? Like, why we cannot use Heroku Flow for our use case, and
Yeah,
yeah,
Heroku Flow is more opinionated, and
got it,
remember, the Heroku platform is opinionated. All of the developer experience is simplified, so you focus on the business, and you don't need to spend a bunch of times, like for example, configuring an what YAML file
yeah,
and having like that control, like grain control of the workflow.
got it,
It's or simplify the work, and also it is for specific applications that are deployed to Heroku. So this
got
is
it,
not going to be your CI/CD for like general purpose applications. It is not a CI/CD as a service for general purpose like Travis or Circle CI. It's going to be for your Heroku applications specifically. So
okay,
that's like the main difference.
got it,
You can also integrate both. You can have like GitHub Actions and manage a bunch of different stuff on GitHub Actions and manage also the deployment as well to Heroku using
got it,
Actions too. So
okay,
that's also another way to integrate those. But with GitHub Actions, you are going to have like way more control. It's going to be more, more customizable.
right, more flexible, more customizable. While if you're building a Heroku application only, then yeah, Heroku flows are kind make sense. I know that you can also like do a little bit of a customization on Heroku Flow as well. But again, I'm not sure like to what extent. So
Yeah, and we're going to focus just on the basics to let people like it start like getting an introduction to what Heroku Flow is and how they
okay,
can use it.
awesome. All right, so Julian, over to your activity.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna switch the screens to your screens.
Thank you very much. So first, I mentioned that we are going to talk about the Heroku Flow. So I wanted to share the website with you. Go to heroku.com/flow. And from here, you can see all of the different products that we have around managing the continuous delivery on Heroku and all of the developer lifecycle here. Well, what we need to start building or to start using these features, we need an Heroku application and a GitHub repository. So what we have here is a very basic Lightning Web Components open source application deployed to Heroku. This is created using the create LWC app command.
Mm-hmm.
And we already push that code into our repository on GitHub.
Awesome.
That repository is going to be under my username, and it is Heroku LWC Playground. This is fresh. It doesn't have anything here, and we are going to see how can we enable this automatic deployment from scratch and give it a try.
Okay.
So let's go to our Heroku dashboard. Here we can see we have that application we created, the Heroku LWC Playground. So let's click on the Heroku LWC Playground. And now we are going to the Deploy tab. On the Deploy tab is where we are going to have the GitHub integration. So first, we need to connect my application to GitHub. So I need to allow GitHub to access Heroku and allow Heroku to access GitHub. So let's click on connect to GitHub. We can select the user. In this case, we are going to use my username, my personal username to deploy the application. And then let's search for that repository. So it's called Heroku LWC. Let's click on search. And there we have it. We have the Heroku LWC Playground. It
Okay.
can also work with private repositories when you give GitHub the access to read uh, the information.
Got
So
it.
you will give permissions.
Okay.
Let's connect the repository to this application. I'm going to click on connect. And now my application is connected. That doesn't mean we are deploying automatically. We need to go to the next step, which is automatic deploys. So we will need to enable the automatic deploys. And remember, I told you you will be able to pick the branch. So right
Hmm.
now, for time purposes, we are going to use the main branch, and we can enable the automatic deploys.
Got it.
My application right now doesn't have tests, but if they have tests, we can enable the CI, which is the continuous integration, and Heroku is going to run the test for us. And if the test passes, is going to deploy the application. If the test fails, they are not going to deploy. But we can leave this for later.
Got
Let's
it.
enable that feature. So enable automatic deployments, and now all of the all of the commits that are going to main are going to be deployed to Heroku. And from here, you can also do a manual deploy. Let's say if you want to deploy a branch right now, but the branch is already deployed, so we don't need to do this step. And that's it. Right now,
Awesome.
application, as you can see on this icon, is going to deploy automatically when I push code to main. So let's do that, right, Mohit?
Yeah, sure.
So let's go to my Visual Studio Code, and let me open one of my components here on the modules, my application. I have the application, and let me delete this custom message.
Okay.
And hello, Trailblazers. So this is my new feature right now.
Okay.
It's a very, very
It's a very
big,
big feature.
but
Okay.
let's run it locally. So we are doing the local development. So make sure the feature is there. I'm open my local application, Hello Trailblazers. Nice. This is what I want to push. If you see my deployed application, it has the edit message. And now let's go and deploy this. So I'm going to add the change. I'm going to commit a message, a new greeting, and we are going to push to origin main, like to GitHub, instead to Heroku. So remember,
Got
if I
it.
push Heroku, it's going to do the manual deploy, but I want to do the automatic. So git push origin main. So now my new change is on GitHub. So if I go to GitHub, I refresh, I have a new commit. But now on my application, we are deploying a new version. So let me go here and see if we can take a look. Okay, this is the repository. And from here, I'm not sure how to check the progress. Let me see with activity.
Maybe the yeah, maybe the activities. Yeah, there you go. The build
But
is in progress.
I know that there is a build in progress, and this is the one that we did automatically. So
Yeah,
let's
so you can view
come
the progress here.
and right now we are getting the log. Let's enable the auto scroll. And when it is finished, we are going to take a look at the changing here. So right now it
Okay.
has deployed. We just need
So yeah,
to
so
build components on the
yeah,
application.
so Julian, so just to make it clear, right? So Heroku has both the options for deployment, right? That's what you're saying. Like you can just connect your Heroku to Git and then forget about, pushing anything to Heroku and, just push it to your Git and it will automatically be sort of deployed once the automatic deployment is enabled. But you can also, let's say you are not using a GitHub and, you would just want to deploy to Heroku, then you can also remotely deploy to the Heroku by just doing that, git push to that Heroku main.
Exactly. And there are like more advanced features. You have access to the API, and you might be able to integrate with other different platforms as
Got it.
well. But the de facto platform to the deployments is going to be GitHub in this
Okay,
case.
perfect.
Okay, so this is automatic deployments to Heroku using GitHub. Now it is finishing, and we will be able to refresh and see the change. So this is local, this is remote, refresh, and hello Trailblazer. So the new feature has been deployed.
Got it.
Now let's add a Heroku button.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for the Heroku button, I'm going to bring the documentation because we will need to copy a couple of things that are very easy from the documentation. So what do you need? First, you will need to create an app.json file in your repository. It needs to live in the repository. And this is the description of your application, like metadata from your application. One of the cool things about the Heroku button is that you can also automate the add-ons. Let's say your application uses PostgreSQL, Redis, Heroku Connect. You can add those add-ons in the same app.json, and when you deploy the application, those add-ons are going to be automatically created for you too. So that's a very interesting feature. So let's create the app.json on our, let me have a copy so I can like read my notes here to avoid like switching. So let's create that app.json file on my repository. Let's open the app.json and start. Whoops, it is a JSON, not an array. Okay, perfect. So we need a name. In this case, let me add the name of my application. It's on lowercase. So it's going to be LWC Playground.
Mm-hmm.
It's very recommended to have a description.
Mm-hmm.
This is a LWC Playground on Heroku. And the repository where this application lives, it's, I don't want to use memory.
Yeah,
Let's go,
exactly.
yeah, because memory sometimes fail. You can add a logo, but I don't have a beautiful logo here, so I'm going to avoid the logo. And you can add keywords if you want to make this descriptive. But
Awesome.
I think with these basic features, we can do it. You can also specify the build packs in here. Let's say if you are using a custom build pack or you are using multiple build packs as well for your application, you can specify those. An example of that, let me go to eCars. If you want to see like an app.json more complete, here on eCars, you can see that we have a logo. We can also specify environment variables that are going to be asked when we deploy the application. We can specify the different build packs. We can specify add-ons. So this app.json file it's more complete. So I will invite you to go to the documentation and play with it. Okay, we have a basic app.json. Then what we need to do, I deleted again the file. Don't break my JSON, Julian. Okay, then we will need to add the button to the
Mm-hmm.
repository. So
Okay.
to add the button to the repository, there is a section and we have a template. So the template is written in two different languages. You can use the template using Markdown, or you can use the template using HTML, depending where the button is going to live. If it is in a README file, you might want to use the Markdown, but if it is on a website, you might want to use the HTML piece. So let's copy the template from for Markdown that we are going to add to the README piece. So here on the top, and that pretty much it. The button has other properties. Let's say if you want to deploy a specific branch, or you want to fill out a specific environment variables, you can also pass certain parameters to the URL, and those parameters are going to be automatically added when you deploy. For example, here it's remember I told you that a lot of people use this for bots.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an application called Slacking. It's kind of like a Slack inviter when you want to have like your Slack instance close and invite people. You can pretty much deploy this Slack into Heroku, and that's a Slack inviter as well. So this is like an example how to create a button that is going to use that specific repository and a specific branch, and it will fill out the Slack subdomain environment variable. So you can parameterize this.
Yeah.
So let's give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
Add these two changes, the
Yep.
app.json and the readme, git commit add Heroku button, git push origin main. It will trigger a new Heroku deploy, even though we don't have a new feature, but we are pushing to main. And remember, every push to main is going to trigger an automatic deploy.
Yep.
But what I want to show you from here, it's on the README. Now you have a deploy to Heroku button.
Mm-hmm.
You have a deploy to Heroku button, and you click on this. This will open Heroku, and now it's bringing you the create new app.
Got
So if
it.
you specify a logo, you are going to see the logo here, and here you pick the application name and see that it's going to deploy the main branch from Heroku LWC Playground. And you saw like two steps: add a
Yeah.
app on the file, describe your application, and then add the Heroku button to README, and you have a very easy way to deploy applications.
Yeah, and this is Julian. Just for my confirmation, this is also for services and or web apps, right? Like if I
Yeah,
just have a node process, like a web process, then it's the same thing, right?
it is the same thing. It's
Got it.
any Heroku application can be deployed this way. So that simplifies and augment your developer experience. If you are like writing something that you want a lot of people to use, click to deploy.
Yeah, and what about the environment variables, Julian? If there are environment variables, do I have to manually go and set it, or can I script it? Like,
You have two ways. So when you first need to specify the environment variables on the app.json file.
okay.
Like these are the environment variables that I'm going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you add those, they are going to appear here as a form.
Ah,
So you
okay, that's
fill
cool.
out those by hand, but they are asking that at the beginning.
Ah, that's cool.
But remember on the documentation that you can also parameterize if you want to pre-fill those environment variables.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's going to be pre-filled here.
Got it. Okay.
Example for e-cars, as an example for e-cars, see that we have the app base and you have Kafka. Kafka is by default on false, and the app base right now it doesn't have like any value. But when we go to the different buttons,
Yeah.
you can see here on the manual deploy we have different buttons.
Yeah.
The environment variables, it is not visible here, but the environment variables are going to be pre-filled. So this is the
Okay.
Heroku QTT application. So let's click on deploy, and now this is pre-filled,
Oh,
the
okay.
MQTT broker.
That's
If I'm
awesome.
going to deploy the streaming, this should say eCars real time. I click and it says eCars real time. So
Awesome.
depending on the URL you pass to the deploy button, those variables are going to be pre-filled.
Excellent. Awesome.
The approach we are using here on eCars is that remember that we are using two build packs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you the app.json in a second. We are using two build packs. One of those build packs is to manage a mono repo.
Got
So
it.
we have one single GitHub repository, but multiple Heroku applications. Here we are telling the build pack, hey, the application we want to deploy lives under this folder.
Got it.
And if we go back to the app.json, let me go back to the app.json, we are using the Heroku
Monorepo
mono
build pack.
and Node.js. So if
Perfect.
you take a look at the Buildpack monorepo, this allows you to manage monorepo on Heroku, and they are telling you pretty much the only thing you need to do is specify the environment variable where that application lives.
Okay. Awesome.
That's the app-based environment variable. Okay, that's automatic deployments with GitHub, and that's the Heroku buttons. But remember, Heroku Flow is bigger, so let's talk about pipelines.
Yep.
So Right now, I want to have the same LWC app living on two different environments. I want to have a staging and I want to have production.
Okay.
So let's create a pipeline. So we are going to click on this drop down, and now we are going to create a new pipeline
Okay.
instead of an application.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is asking me for the name of the pipeline. So this is going to be Duque LWC pipeline.
Got it.
And tell me the repository you are going to connect to this pipeline is going to be the playground. Let me see if I can search the playground pretty quick. Yes.
Yep.
Connect the playground and create the pipeline.
Yep.
So now we have like a different view. Here we have access to the review apps, a feature we are going to look in a moment. Then we have the staging phase and the production phase.
Got it.
So we will need to create two apps. One is
Mm-hmm.
going to be staging and the other one is going to be production. So let's create a new staging app. So this is going to be the Duke LWC staging. It is unique. I can create the app. And here, I don't have anything deployed yet.
Got it.
But here, I'm going to configure automatic deploys. So every time I push to main, it's going to automatically deploy to a staging.
Mm-hmm.
So let's enable automatic deploys to a staging. And
Okay.
now I can deploy a branch, like
Mm-hmm.
doing a deploy main, because right now
Perfect.
we can, and it is deploying main. And then
Okay.
let's create or add the other application. So let's add the app, and I can add an already existing app. And remember, we already have something deployed. So let's search for Heroku LWC. That's going to be my production, but I don't want to have automatic deploys on production. So let's go configure automatic deploys and disable those. Okay.
Perfect.
So what are we doing here? Every time we push to main, we want to deploy to staging. Then, when we are making sure that staging is what we want, we are going to promote to production. See, promote to production is a new button we have here. So automatic deployments are going to staging, and then we can manual deployments going to production. You can also have different branches, like the staging branch go to staging and production go to production and doing everything automated. That's up to you. And then let's enable the review apps. So every time we open a new pull request, it will deploy an application. So enable review apps, create the new review apps for new pull requests automatically. Waits for CI. Remember, we don't have tests right now, so we are not enabling CI. And we also have a way to destroy stale applications. This means like after a certain number of days that this pull request hasn't been reviewed, destroy the application so it doesn't incur into charges because this is an app that it's using Heroku resources, it's using a Dino.
Got
So
it.
let's destroy this. And we can select a region, but we are going to deploy on United States. So enable review apps. So now that we have everything working, let's see if we have anything to promote to production. Nothing. You can see that the same commit is deployed on both production and staging. So we have the same application deploying too, and we don't have any pull request. Let's create
Got
a new
it.
in these last 5 minutes. So let me go to my beautiful application. Let's add another info element here. This is a new feature. I am not
I'm loving your features, Julian.
very creative creating features. Let's do another thing. Let's
Yeah.
go and open the package JSON and enable the test command.
Mm-hmm.
Let's create a basic test command that is going to execute. the test unit.
Okay.
So every time I run npm test, which is the default command that Heroku CI is going to use, I'm
Right.
running my test.
Got it.
Those are my two features. Okay, it is not that bad, Mo. It is
Yeah.
not that bad.
Yeah. It's not. It's not.
Git status. Oh, but wait. We are going to open a pull request.
Yeah.
So count, Hotaduke. Let's enable tests.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got my name and the dash B
Yeah.
because you taught us how to do it. Now I can make sure that I add my files, enable tests, and I'm going to push origin JDIC enable tests.
Got it.
It is not going to deploy automatically. Why? Because we are not pushing to main.
Got it.
So nothing is happening. Now we will need to click here, create a new pull request. Obviously, we will need a good description. These enable tests, not very good, but it works. Create the pull
Yeah.
request.
Okay.
And now, after my pull request has been created, you can see here this branch has not been deployed. Awesome. We can go to Heroku. Heroku, it's here. We have
Here you go.
uh, a new pull request.
Perfect.
Mostly, this was doing it automatically, right? Automatically create review apps.
It was creating a review apps.
So maybe it is creating it right now while we speak.
It might be. Yeah. It just shows that you have the commit there.
Yeah. Let me create. Okay, the review app already exists.
It exists somewhere.
So it is deploying. So let's wait until it deploys, and we can have
There you go. Oh
see.
no,
Okay,
sorry.
no. I
Uh,
click on.
it it might take some time because that whole LWC process is going to take some time.
Yeah. Let's wait. Meanwhile, for pipeline, you can also manage the permissions if you have a team on your Heroku account and you want to give permissions to other team members to promote applications. This is also possible in here. And let me check the test. We don't have any test enabled, but here you are getting the instructions how to enable the CI. So they recommend you to create an app.json, then that the test uses the tab output. So the CI it is able to parse the messages and show the messages in here, and how to enable the Heroku CI here. Pretty much, you click on enable CI, and it will run the tests from here. Well, let me see. This
It's
deploy.
Yeah, it's going to take some time, Julian, and we are running out of some time
Oh
here.
yeah, one pending deployment. Let me show them the environments. This is pending, but this is the URL that it's giving us.
Got
I
it.
told you that it was like a random. We will need to wait. Remember, it needs to build certain things. But once it deploy, we will be able to have access to that review app and do the whole promotion. So let me close things we don't need while that deploys.
Okay. Julian, I think we're left with a minute, so I would like to take the control.
Deploy. It deployed.
Oh, there you go, right on time. We're
They have
right on time.
in, and then if I merge the pull request, remember this is going to main. And if it is going to main, it's going to deploy on a staging, and then after it deploys to the staging, we will be able to promote to production. See, it is building the app. Now, after it builds, we can promote to production, and the application has been released. Thank you very much, Mo. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Julian. So we have some helpful references again, and you can find more on Sample App Gallery, catch us on Trailblazer community, and we'll share the slides there. With that, thank you so much for joining this series. We will continue to publish some amazing content. Keep the feedback coming, and thank you again, Julian. You want to say something?
Yeah, I was replying on the chat. I got distracted, but thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and uh, caught me this Thursday I will be speaking about Node.js for Salesforce developers. So see you on the next one.
See you on the next one.